Last week, inside the Oval Office, a meeting took place that will define the next decade of American energy. On one side of the resolute desk sat the President of the United States. On the other side sat Darren Woods, the CEO of ExxonMobil. The President's request was massive. He wanted American oil giants to pour $100 billion into Venezuela. He wanted them to rebuild the shattered infrastructure of PDVSA. He wanted to flood the global market with Venezuelan crude. His goal was to lower gas prices and fulfill a major campaign promise. It sounded like a standard political negotiation. But then, Darren Woods dropped a single word that sucked the oxygen out of the room: uninvestable. He looked the President in the eye and told him that the country with the largest oil reserves on Earth is worthless to American capital. Think about the weight of that statement. Venezuela sits on 303 billion barrels of proven oil reserves. That is more than Saudi Arabia. That is more than Russia. That is more than the United States. Yet, the most powerful oil executive in the Western world just walked away from it. Why? The mainstream media is telling you it's about risk management. They're telling you it's about the dilapidated pipelines and the fleeing engineers. They are telling you it's about the $12 billion Venezuela already owes U.S. companies. Those things are true, but they are not the whole truth. They are the cover story. The real reason ExxonMobil walked away is something far more dangerous. It is a reason that involves the Chinese Communist Party. It involves Russian military advisors in Caracas. It involves a geopolitical trap that the White House is desperate to escape. And ExxonMobil refuses to be the bait. Today, we're going to look at the map, not just the balance sheet. We are going to uncover the silent war for South America's energy. We are going to show you why that $100 billion was never about oil. It was about buying back American influence in its own backyard. And we will explain why the free market just told the U.S. government that it will not pay the ransom. Welcome to the reality of the energy war. The Monroe Doctrine 2.0. To understand why this deal died, you have to look at what happened 2 weeks ago in the Caribbean. A fleet of Chinese supertankers was tracked moving toward Venezuelan ports. They were coming to collect payment. For the last decade, while the U.S. was sanctioning Venezuela, China was buying it. They didn't buy it with cash. They bought it with debt. Beijing has loaned roughly $60 billion to Venezuela since 2007. Most of those loans are backed by oil. This is what economists call oil for debt diplomacy. It means that a huge percentage of the oil Venezuela pumps today does not belong to Venezuela. It belongs to China. It goes straight onto Chinese tankers to service interest payment. It never hits the open market. It generates zero revenue for the Venezuelan people. And crucially, it generates zero profit for any Western company that tries to partner with them. This is the first layer of the trap. If ExxonMobil invests billions to restart Venezuelan production, who gets that oil? Under current contracts, the first barrels pumped go to pay off the Chinese debt. Exxon would essentially be using American capital to pay back Beijing's bad loans. Darren Woods knows this. His legal team has seen the contracts. He knows that PDVSA is not a sovereign oil company anymore. It is a subsidiary of Chinese state interests. But it gets worse. Look at the security infrastructure protecting those oil fields. 'Tis not Venezuelan police. It is Russian military advisors and Wagner Group contractors who have been embedded in the country for years. They control the security perimeters around critical infrastructure. They manage the intelligence networks that keep the current regime in power. So here is the picture the President is asking American companies to step into. He wants them to send American engineers to work in fields guarded by Russians. He wants them to pump oil that is legally claimed by the Chinese. And he wants them to put up $100 billion of shareholder money to do it. This is why the President's plan is actually a revival of the Monroe Doctrine. The Monroe Doctrine is the 19th century policy that said foreign powers are not welcome in the Western Hemisphere. The White House sees Venezuela as a lost territory. They see a Chinese and Russian forward operating base 3 hours by plane from Miami. The $100 billion plan was not an investment strategy. It was a geopolitical eviction notice. The plan was to flood the country with so much American money and influence that it would displace the Chinese and Russians. It was an attempt to buy back loyalty. But there is a problem with that strategy. In a capitalist system, the government cannot force private companies to execute foreign policy. ExxonMobil answers to its shareholders, not the State Department. ExxonMobil's mandate is to generate profit, not to fight a proxy war with China. When Darren Woods said uninvestable, he was drawing a line in the sand. He was saying that private capital will not be the foot soldiers in this conflict. If the United States wants to reclaim Venezuela, the government will have to pay for it. Corporate America is staying home. The physical reality. Now, let's strip away the politics and look at the steel and concrete. Even if the Chinese debt vanished tomorrow, even if the Russians packed up and left, the physical reality of Venezuela's oil industry is a horror show. In the late 90s, Venezuela was pumping 3.5 million barrels a day. It was a machine. It was efficient, modern, and technically sophisticated. Today, production struggles to hit 1 million barrels. That is a 71% collapse. But the number doesn't tell you the real story. The real story is rust. Oil infrastructure is biological. It needs constant care. If you stop maintaining a pipeline for a month, it degrades. If you stop maintaining a refinery for a year, it becomes dangerous. Venezuela has stopped maintaining its infrastructure for a decade. Reports from the ground describe refineries that are literally falling apart. Pipelines are leaking crude into the Caribbean. Its processing units have been cannibalized for spare parts. To fix this, you don't just need money, you need time, and you need people. This is the factor everyone forgets. The human capital flight. When the nationalization happened, thousands of PDVSA's best engineers were fired. They didn't just sit around. They left. They went to Calgary. They went to Houston. They went to Dubai. They are working for Exxon. They are working for Shell. They are working for Aramco. They have built new lives in countries that respect contracts and pay them in real currency. They are not coming back to Caracas to earn worthless believers. They are not coming back to work under military generals who know nothing about geology. So when the president talks about a quick turnaround, when he promises that Venezuelan oil will lower gas prices next summer, he is fighting the laws of physics. Industry analysts estimate it would take $8 to $10 billion a year for 10 years just to get back to 2 million barrels. That is a decade of burning cash before you see a real return. And that assumes political stability. That assumes no more sanctions. That assumes no civil war. That assumes the courts honor the contracts. In the world of oil, uncertainty is a cost. And the cost of uncertainty in Venezuela is infinite. ExxonMobil operates in Guyana, right next door. In Guyana, the government respects contracts. In Guyana, the courts function. In Guyana, production is skyrocketing. Why would Exxon cross the border into a failed state when they have a gold mine right next door? It makes zero economic sense. And that brings us to the smaller players, the wildcatters, the legal and market trap. During the meeting, administration suggested that if the big majors won't play, the independents will. They talked about the wildcatters, the cowboys of the oil patch. These are smaller, private companies that take big risks for big rewards. Some of them are reportedly eager to go. But this is where the trap snaps shut. Let's look at the legal nightmare waiting for them. When he promises that Venezuelan oil will lower gas prices next summer, he is fighting the laws of physics. Industry analysts estimate it would take $8 to $10 billion a year for 10 years just to get back to 2 million barrels. That is a decade of burning cash before you see a real return. And that assumes political stability. That assumes no more sanctions. That assumes no civil war. That assumes the courts honor the contracts. In the world of oil, uncertainty is a cost. And the cost of uncertainty in Venezuela is infinite. ExxonMobil operates in Guyana, right next door. In Guyana, the government respects contracts. In Guyana, the courts function. In Guyana, production is skyrocketing. Why would Exxon cross the border into a failed state when they have a gold mine right next door? It makes zero economic sense. And that brings us to the smaller players. The wildcatters, the legal and market trap. During the meeting, the administration suggested that if the big majors won't play, the independents will. They talked about the wildcatters, the cowboys of the oil patch. These are smaller private companies that take big risks for big rewards. Some of them are reportedly eager to go, but this is where the trap snaps shut. Let's look at the legal nightmare waiting for them. Venezuela still owes $12 billion to ExxonMobil and ConocoPhillips. These are arbitration awards from international tribunals. They are final judgments. They are not negotiable. If a small American company goes into Venezuela and starts pumping oil, if they put that oil on a tanker and send it to a U.S. port, Exxon and Conoco will be waiting with a lawsuit. They will argue that the oil belongs to them as payment for the stolen assets. They will ask U.S. courts to seize that oil. And they will likely win. This creates a bizarre civil war within the American energy industry. You have the giants who were burned in the past, and you have the newcomers who want to try their luck. The president tried to solve this with a verbal promise. He told them to deal with the U.S., not Venezuela. He implied that he would create a special channel, a protected corridor where the U.S. government acts as the middleman. But can the president override a federal court judgment? Can the executive branch tell a judge to ignore a $12 billion debt? That is a constitutional crisis waiting to happen. It violates the separation of powers. It undermines the very property rights that make America investable. Darren Woods understands this precedent. If the U.S. government can nullify a legal debt to serve a political goal, then no contract is safe. Not in Venezuela. Not in the United States. By refusing the deal, Exxon is actually protecting the rule of law. They are saying that property rights matter more than political expediency. And then there is the market reality. Oil markets are driven by futures contracts. Traders bet on what supply will look like in 6 months, 12 months, 2 years. Traders are not betting on Venezuela. The futures curve has barely moved since this announcement. The market knows that even if the money flows, the oil won't. The market knows that the logistics are broken. The market knows that the Chinese debt overhang is a poison pill. So, for the average American watching this, for the driver filling up their truck in Ohio or Pennsylvania, do not expect relief from this headline. The promise of cheap Venezuelan gas is a mirage. It is a political narrative designed to show action. But action is not the same as results. We are witnessing a defining moment in the relationship between state and capital. For decades, the U.S. government and U.S. oil companies moved in lockstep. What was good for Exxon was good for America. That era is over. We are now in an era where national security interests and shareholder interests are diverging. The U.S. government needs to secure the Western Hemisphere against Chinese encroachment. That is a valid national security goal. But U.S. companies are no longer willing to foot the bill for it. They have become global entities. They have duties to shareholders in London, Tokyo, and New York. They cannot justify burning billions of dollars to solve a diplomatic failure. So where does this leave us? It leaves us with a stalemate. The sanctions will likely remain or be tweaked superficially. The Chinese will keep their grip on the oil flows. The Russians will keep their advisors in the barracks. And Venezuela will remain a broken giant. The $100 billion plan is dead on arrival. Not because the president lacks will, but because the math simply does not work. And in the end, math always wins. As you watch the headlines in the coming weeks, pay attention to the silence of the other majors. Chevron is quiet. Shell is quiet. BP is quiet. They are watching Exxon. They see the trap, and they are not stepping into it. This is the reality of the world we live in. It is complex. It is dangerous. And it is driven by forces much larger than the price at the pump. I want to leave you with a question. If national security demands that we reclaim influence in Venezuela, if it is truly critical to kick China and Russia out of our backyard, should the government be trying to trick private companies into doing it? Or should the taxpayers be told the truth about what this war actually costs? Because right now, we are trying to fight a geopolitical war on a budget. And as history shows, that never ends well. This standoff in Venezuela is just one front in the energy war. While everyone is looking at Caracas, something much bigger is happening next door. In Guyana, a massive oil boom is reshaping the region. And guess who is trying to buy their way in there too? The Chinese. But that is a story for the next video. Thanks for watching. If you want to understand the real mechanics of the global economy, if you want the truth that doesn't fit in a soundbite, make sure you are subscribed. I will see you in the next one.